Hello and welcome to the first episode of Learning C#. My name is Hayden and I'm going to guide you through the basics of the language in this episode. So let's look at what we'll be covering today. First off, we'll be covering the basic C# program structure by seeing a simple Hello World app, and then we'll go into a deeper dive into what the code meant. So here we have the code for our simple Hello World app. It may look complicated, but it will be easier to understand than you might at first think. So let's go into what we saw there. So first off, before I cover what using meant, I've got to cover what a namespace is. A namespace allows us to group multiple classes together under one name so that the code becomes easier to handle. In this case, our namespace was first C#. So any classes we make, currently only program, will be available as first C# dot and then the name of the class. So now I can look at using, and this is a keyword that links to namespaces. It essentially takes all of the classes available to us under the namespace given and removes the need to type out their entire name. For example, the code that we see there, using system, allowed us to use Console.WriteLine instead of system.console.WriteLine. Now, public static class program is an interesting one because there's a few things to note here. To get started, let's look at the first term, which is public. This means that the method or class will be available to everyone, regardless of where they're calling it from. This is called an access modifier. Next, let's look at the second term, static. This means that this method or class belongs to the type, not the instance. So an instance of the method or class, in this case a class called program, is not required to access the static members. Next, let's look at the third term, class. In C#, a class is a group of similar objects. It's a template from which more objects can be created. It can have fields, methods, constructors, and more. Finally, let's look at the last term, program. That's the identifier or name of the class. So you would call program when you want to do anything related to that class. Now let's go on to the next line. I've already covered what public and static mean, so I'll skip ahead to void. Void is the declaration of the return type. Basically, it tells us that this method, and we'll get to what that is next, won't return a value, so we shouldn't expect anything back from it. Other return types could be anything from string to integer to floating point. There's all sorts of data types. I'll cover that next episode. String args is a variable. This will be useful to know later on. In this case, we can tell from the code that we'll have access to a variable called args, which has a data type of string with the square brackets, which means an array of strings. And finally, we've come to the WriteLine statement. This is how we call a method. First, we call the namespace, or not if we included it with a using reference earlier. And then, separated with a period, we call the name of the method. Then, in brackets, we pass it any arguments that it needs. In our case, we pass Console.WriteLine the argument hello world, which is a string. So now I'm going to open up a site called .NETFiddle.net, which will allow me to write out this code and run it without the need for a text editor or IDE. Link will be in the description. As you can see, that's what gets printed out. It's not exactly the same as the code I provided because I'm lazy and couldn't be bothered to set it up properly. But yeah, thanks for watching. On the screen is my Twitter and my Instagram username, my website link, and my email address, so you can contact me if you'd like to learn more. Stay tuned for the next episode on next Sunday.